The industry is in constant change. Jens Jonkers, editor for Techpulse, will keep you up to date with the latest trends in the Belgian IT industry with results from a large-scale market research. And Tom de Ruyck will close the debates today.
Hello everyone and welcome at our next presentation. I hope you had a good morning already because I am very thrilled to be back again here at Digital Transformation Day. In the coming half hour I'm going to guide you through some very interesting findings of a market research we did in the Belgian IT industry. And after that you will have a good view on how the Belgian IT landscape of 2021 looks like. I'm going to start with a short introduction on myself. My name is Jens Jonkers. I'm editor for Techpulse and Techpulse Business. And I was also editor-in-chief for the Techpulse Business Jaarboek of this year, for which we also conducted our research. Before going to the results, I'm going to explain you how we got to these results. Our research consisted of two parts. A first online questionnaire focused on market shares. We asked to hundreds of Belgian companies who their providers are for different types of software, different types of hardware and different types of services, so that we know who are the biggest providers of these services in Belgium. We also asked them how happy they are about their providers, to give a score from 1 to 10 on customer satisfaction. For the first survey we had 385 participants. Then a few weeks later we sent out a second survey to all of these participants. Now we wanted to know how big their yearly IT budget was. And of course, how do they spend that budget? What do Belgian companies see as the most important software or most important hardware to invest in? And we also wanted to know how has the coronavirus impacted the yearly budget and the yearly investment plans. But a bit of a smaller group of participants for this survey, but I think 184 participants is still a very nice number. We have arrived at the most important part of my presentation. It is of course the results of our study. Now I could show you hundreds of graphs and overwhelm you with numbers and percentages, but I'm going to try to keep this very to the point. Let's talk first about IT budgets. How big is the average budget that a Belgian company can spend on IT investments? You can see the full answers in this graph, but I'm going to take out a few numbers that interested me the most. We see that 27% of companies work with a budget of less than 10,000 euros. I believe that in this group are mainly small or medium-sized businesses who in general have a bit of a more limited budget. You see on the other hand, however, at 11% works with a budget of more than 1 million euro. So you can see there is a very big variety between the yearly IT budget that companies have. Of course, it's also very important to know how do companies want to spend their budgets. That's why we asked what they see as the biggest priorities for this year and of course also for the coming years. Again, I'm going to highlight the top 3 priorities here. The first one is upgrading their PCs and upgrading their operating systems. You may know, for example, that Microsoft has just released Windows 11. And for the coming year, companies will gonna have to upgrade their systems to work with the most recent version for Windows, for example. A second priority is security. And I believe that maybe already by next year this might become the most important IT priority for Belgian companies. In the third place we have ICT alignment. Now we're going to focus on market shares. I want to start with software here. Again, I'm going to limit myself to a few key takeaways because in the answers for all different categories we saw that there were a few trends that kept showing up. First one is the dominance of Microsoft in the Belgian software market. Whenever we had a category where Microsoft was one of the available players, we saw that they dominated the market with a very high market share. This was the case, for example, ERP software, CRM software, Office software, operating systems, and go on. However, when Microsoft was absent, we saw that the markets in general were very fragmented. Of course, there were a few players that could get a market share of 10-15%, but we seldom see one player who stood out and pulled a very big part of the market towards himself. And a third takeaway I wanted to share here is that we noticed a correlation between customer satisfaction and market share, which I think is quite logical. That when a company has a lot of satisfied customers, then of course it will have a positive effect on their market share as well. Of course, there are always a few rules to the exception. Now, I want to show these two graphs to visually make clear what I just told you. You see on the left side, the market shares for operating systems. Windows 10 alone has a market share of only 50%, of almost 50%. If you add up the percentages of older versions of Windows, then Microsoft would have a market share of more than 50% in the market of operating systems. Now, I'm very curious to see that when we do the research again next year, what percentage Windows 11 already will have. Then on the right side, for example, you can see the market of antivirus. Here you can already see that there isn't like one provider that can get a very high percentage like Microsoft does. The market leader Symantec can only get 9% of the market, and there is a very lot of, you can see a lot of fragmentation inside this market. Now, how will the numbers evolve in the coming years? We asked the participants in what software they want to keep investing in the next 12 months. In the first place, you see Office applications. And then again on the second place, here's security, which only shows that security will keep getting important year by year. In the third place, we have operating systems, which is, for example, Windows 11 or macOS Monterey. And then fourth is ICT management. On the fifth place, we have the further digitalization of document management. Again, a market where Microsoft it's very dominant with their applications like Office 365. Now, from software, we go over to hardware. I'm going to start with a very interesting figure. If you have a smartphone or a laptop from your employer, you're definitely not the only one. It still seems very common in Belgium that an employer gives a smartphone and or a laptop to their employees. For smartphones, 57% of our participants said they got a smartphone from their employers. For laptops, this percentage was even 76%. This means 3 out of 4 employees. These were, for me, the most important takeaways and conclusions from our research on hardware. If we take a look at markets related to smartphones or PCs, the numbers in Belgium seems to follow the global market shares. That's, for example, if you look at smartphones, you see that Samsung is the most popular provider, closely followed by Apple. For example, for PCs, for desktops, then we see that HP is a dominant player, which is also the same in the global market. So the Belgian market doesn't behave itself very different from other markets around the world. Just as in software, there were some markets, however, where we again saw a lot of fragmentation, a lot of smaller players that are really competing with itself, and every percentage seemed to count. And also again here, often a high customer satisfaction gets rewarded with a high market share. What will be the most important hardware investment for the coming years? As you can see, the laptop will still be a very important investment, with 60% of companies saying that they will keep investing into new laptops. This, of course, also has to do with the shift companies have to make towards more remote working, and employees really need to have the best material everywhere they are, so they can do their work in the best conditions. Also important investment categories are network equipment like Wi-Fi routers, smartphones, servers, and then safe and secure storage solutions. We've already talked about software and hardware. Now let's go over to IT services. So the market shares of IT services. So these were for me the most remarkable conclusions in the market shares of IT services. I wanted to mainly highlight telecom and clouds. The Belgian telecom landscape is characterized by a fierce battle between Proximus and Telenet. Telenet, we saw that Telenet overtook Proximus this year as the biggest provider for fixed internet. But also a bit of good news for Proximus, they are still the biggest mobile provider. However, the market shares here can change every year. And we also have a third big player, Orange, who dreams of becoming the biggest player one day. Maybe they will get it next year, but we will see about. I was also very surprised by the results of cloud computing. Because if we would look at the global market, then AWS, so Amazon Web Services, is the biggest player with a market share that's around 33%. As we noticed that normally the market shares in Belgium are quite similar with the global market share, you would expect it to be the same. However, AWS doesn't seem to be that popular in Belgium. The cloud provider only got a percentage of around a market share of around 7%. And yeah, and while Microsoft Azure and Google Cloud Platform were around 20%. So it's quite a big difference, which I mainly did not expect. Again, we see a lot of different segments in the IT services industry where there isn't one player that stands out. We also have a few smaller players that are competing with each other. So again, I will show you a few graphs to make it visually clear. Here you see the results of telecom. With left, we have fixed internet, where you can see Telenet being the biggest player. And then on the right is mobile internet. You can see that Proximus is now the number one, and that Orange seems to be a more dangerous competitor in the mobile internet sector than in for fixed internet. Then the cloud, so you can see Microsoft Azure and Google Cloud are very close to each other, but it is Microsoft that just takes the top spot. And as you can see, also AWS isn't even in the AWS just barely makes the top 5. And we'll look at cloud storage. Their Amazon Cloud Drive can't compete at all with the more popular solutions like Microsoft OneDrive, Google Drive, and Dropbox. So this concludes the part of the market shares. What I would like to discuss is the impact of COVID-19. No one would argue that the coronavirus pandemic has had a major influence on all of our lives. But how big is this impact on the Belgian IT sector? Can we really speak of a corona effect? So first, I want to see how the pandemic has influenced the yearly IT budgets of the Belgian companies. And here it seems that the effect of the coronavirus is actually quite limited. 59%, or 6 out of 10 organizations, didn't have to make any alterations to their yearly IT budgets. They didn't decide to start spending more because of the coronavirus, but they didn't have to lower their budgets. For 31%, so 3 out of 10, has decided, okay, now is the time to really start investing. They have raised their budgets to be able to make more investments. Only 10% has had to lower their IT budgets. Now, our research can't really conclude if this is related to companies having a lower revenue, but in the end, they did have less means to make the investments they need. Now, how has the coronavirus impacted innovation and the will for innovation among Belgian companies? There is a general saying that the coronavirus has been a serious boost for digital transformation, but do we see this also in the Belgian IT sector? Our results seem to go in that way. Although 42% didn't report any changes in their innovation behavior, They didn't start quickly adopting new technologies, but they're also not holding back on adopting new technologies. I think the most important figure here is that those 51% that say, yes, we are adapting technologies faster now. We are showing ourselves to be more innovative than we were in the past. And there is only 7% who have become a bit more cautious, saying maybe now is not the time to start investing into new technologies. So we have seen that companies are becoming more innovative, but then it might be interesting to take a look at what they think will become the most important trends in technology. You will see that this lies mainly in line with the investment priorities that we discussed earlier. Top of the list here is cybercrime. Companies are investing in security, and finding ways to combat cybercrime will only become more important. The pandemic has only showed us that that the danger of cybercrime is more present than ever, and that cyber criminals are becoming way more inventive in finding new ways to trick us. Second trend is home working. Due to the pandemic, organizations were forced to let their employees from work. But as it looks like, home working is here to stay. Although we are starting to shift more towards a system of hybrid working, where you can sort of divide your time over working from the office and working from home. Of course, this will lead to new investments, and organizations will have to find the right technology to empower employees to work from wherever they are. Next, a few other trends that are in the list that are artificial intelligence and of course cloud computing. The predictions are that the cloud computing industry will grow to a value of more than 1 trillion in just a few years. And also in Belgium, the cloud industry will make a serious growth in the coming years. The fifth priority is 5G. So the fifth priority is 5G. Now the adoption of 5G is going a bit slowly in Belgium and actually in the whole of Europe. But companies seem to be very interested already in this new technology and are looking for ways to already experiment and find out what 5G could mean for them. As a rollout of 5G will start keeping up pace, I believe 5G will also become higher will climb higher on the priority list. Now, I think a last important impact to discuss is the impact that the pandemic had on our social lives, and this is probably the biggest of them all. No one can say that the coronavirus hasn't changed their social life in any way. And this impact is both on our personal lives as well as our professional lives. And it's, of course, we also see in the results of our survey. 73% says that their way of working has changed since the start of the pandemic. And that's mostly due to having to work more from home, and so the contact with their colleagues or contacts with customers has changed drastically. But however, 72% wants to keep working from home in the future. We can further divide this in 55% of the respondents that wants to go to this hybrid system of working a few days from home, working a few days in the office, whatever suits them best. But there's almost 20% that say, I want to keep working full-time from home. Only 1 out of 10 respondents said that they're absolutely sick of home working and want to start working full-time in the office again. Then, when we did this research last year, there was a lot of uncertainty about what effect the coronavirus could have on the job stability. A lot of respondents weren't really sure if their job was at risk or if they have to lose salary. And that was completely understandable at the time. 1 year later, we see that now only 5% of our respondents said that they still fear that their job could be at risk. So it's very good to see that this is going in the positive direction. It only means that some form of stability is coming back into our lives. And on this positive note, I would like to wrap up my presentation. Of course, if you want to learn more about the results, you want to have a broader view on the percentages, on the market shares, feel free to contact me after this presentation. You can reach me through LinkedIn. You also see my mail address on this slide, and of course welcome you all to follow us on Techpulse and business.techpulse.be, where you can read everything about the latest technology. Then the only thing I have to say to you is thanks for watching and have a nice digital transformation day.